Hi there, Sutonia here. I wanted to make a video on why to use dual prop and what are the strengths and weaknesses of dual propulsion fits. For this video I'm going to assume that you're fitting a Stasis Webifier in the slot that would occupy the Afterburner slot, since both Afterburner and Stasis Webifier attempt to achieve the same objective, which is range control. So to start with, fittings. Dual propulsion requires you to make a sacrifice in fitting. An Afterburner requires less CPU than a Stasis Webifier does, but it requires 10 more power grid. On frigates in particular, which is where this video is going to focus on, this extra grid cost is going to almost always result in having to give up a low slot to a micro auxiliary power core, or at least a power grid rig compared to an equivalent fit without the Afterburner. A CPU on frigates in particular is much easier. You've got much more leeway on CPU because you can fit meta modules like name damage controls, name scram, name webs, but there isn't really any way you're going to be able to save 10 power grid without butchering your fit by dropping down to lowest tier weapons, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, so I wanted to go in detail with the Taranis specifically because it's one of the questions I get asked the most, and I want to show you why I think dual propulsion Tyrannis is so much better than the non-dual propulsion Tyrannis. So in this EFT, I've got two Tyrannis fits on the left hand side. The top one is a dual propulsion fit. The bottom one is a Stasis Webifier fit. It's a common auxiliary armor repair fit. Anyway, on the right I've got two Crusaders here. It's pretty standard Crusader. The reason why I'm using the Crusader is the fastest frigate, so it demonstrates my point the most. So this is kind of skewed a little bit in my favour, but you'll see how big the advantage is. So anyway, let's say we're fighting a Crusader, which is probably the hardest frigate to fight in the Taranis, because it's going to try and kite you as long as possible in scorch range. So, if we have an Afterburner, let's assume the fight starts about 8 kilometers, which is a very realistic range. I think that's a very realistic range for a typical interceptor fight. That, you're going to mutually scram each other. He's going to try and orbit you as widely as possible. I think 8 kilometers is a very reasonable start for a Tyrannis. Anyway, if we look at these figures, you'll see that this Tyrannis moves at nearly 1800 meters per second, whereas our bottom Tyrannis only moves at 525 meters per second. Now, obviously, both of these Tyrannises are going to catch up to these Crusaders, but if we compare these amounts here, you'll see that this overheating Tyrannis is more than, it's actually more than 1.1 kilometers a second faster than this Crusader. So if we assume the fight starts at 8 kilometers, I wouldn't load antimatter against a Crusader, by the way. I'd use null, but let's just use these numbers just in case. We're going to be getting into antimatter optimal range with about 7 to 8 seconds of the fight starting. Whereas if you compare it to the bottom Tyrannis, the Crusader's moving at 256, this is moving at 525. So it's only gaining on the Crusader at about 250 meters per second. What this means is, this is going this Tyrannis is gaining 1.1 kilometers a second. This Tyrannis is only gaining at 250 meters per second. What this means is this Tyrannis, the dual prop Tyrannis, is going to get to the Crusader into optimal range 4 times faster than the Stasis Webifier Tyrannis. And that's the reason why I prefer the dual prop Tyrannis, because it's just so much better in interceptor duels. You're going to be able to catch up to ships like the Crusader, the Claw, any other ship, any ship that only has that has equal range, that has one less range control tool than you. The Afterburner is such a better tool for gaining on people and catching them. So outside of the specific Tyrannis example, Afterburner gives you much better survivability versus many scenarios, since you're going to be able to mitigate much more damage from additional ships because the Stasis Webifier only affects one target, instead of, every target, which the Afterburner, kind of affects. Remember that Afterburner increases your relative speed a lot more than the Stasis Webifier does, so it's a much better tool for escaping from situations in scram range. And because it increases your relative speed more, it means it also increases your angular velocity more. So, if you're if you're orbiting someone, if you web them, and you're orbiting someone that you have an afterburner but no web, you're gonna be able to hurt their tracking a lot more. And especially in conjunction with ships that have a tracking bonus, like the Taranis does, you can punish ships that don't have a tracking bonus or using weapons with bad tracking much more than you would with just a Stasis Webifier, which is key in certain engagements in the Taranis. Another thing that people don't often consider is heating an afterburn increases the strength, therefore, increasing the range control you have temporarily. Whereas a web is heated for range, which is strong, it's a strong effect, but it's an entirely different effect in the sense that, it doesn't increase the speed you gain on something. Being able to position better also just helps when you're trying to pick some guy off in a gang. Imagine I'm in an interceptor, 100 kilometers off a gate, and I get into a fight with another interceptor out there. The guy I'm fighting has people on the gate. They need to get to where we are, off the gate, having our engagement. If I move away from them, I can prolong the time it takes for their influence to take an effect. So if I'm moving away at 600 ms or so, assuming I'm webbed, versus 250 ms, with, a Stasis Webifier, it's adding an extra 10 or so seconds extra for the average cruiser to get into range. And, any additional time you can get while solo is key. So where is the web better? The web scales a lot better. By that I mean the Afterburner is a very selfish module, in the sense that it only really helps yourself. If I was in a gang with, say, 5 other people, a Stasis Webifier is going to help them all catch up to or stay away from a certain ship, as well as help their damage application to that target, which an Afterburner is going to have no effect on. So a Stasis Webifier is useful to everyone else you're flying with. So, as gangs get bigger, you might want to consider, using a Stasis Webifier more than an Afterburner. And the Stasis Webifier is also a bit better in some scenarios where your opponent is trying to reach a certain position, like going back to a gate, or, reapproaching a station, or maybe trying to get into rep range of a dog-hugging carrier, or, something along those lines. I hope this video was helpful to you. I am Sutonia. Thanks for watching.